Hey, thanks for tuning in to another guitar lesson. I got weekly lessons right here on YouTube every single week. So if you're just tuning in, if this is the first time you watched, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Hit that bell notification. I am Dan Hall. This is Dan H411 Guitar Lessons. Again, every single week, got guitar lessons right here. So keep on coming back for more. Today, I'm going to go ahead and start a new series. This will be about 4 parts, where I'm going to go ahead and take a look at a song that I wrote called Arrhythmia. And the reason I'm going to break this down for you is because I took the time to write this in a couple of different modes that aren't as familiar as your basic Aeolian or your Dorian or your Ionian. I went ahead and used Phrygian and I used Locrian, and I intentionally wrote the song so that we have relative shapes back to each other so it's easy to find them on the fretboard. And I'm going to show you how we can use these to write some really cool music and make some interesting sounds, because that's what it's all about, right? I want you to be able to just pick up the guitar and go. So I'm going to use what I call circular patterning. I'm going to show you how the fretboard and the scale shapes themselves are very circular, and if you could find anchor shapes to help you gravitate back towards to one scale shape, you can just move the scale shapes all over the place up and down the fretboard. And I wanted to kind of take some time over the next few lessons to kind of break down how we can do this with other modes, because a lot of times I focus on the Aeolian or the Ionian, or I'll focus on the minor pentatonic or the major pentatonic. So now I'm going to go ahead and break into a few oddball modes that you don't see too often, just to give you an idea that you can use these concepts with pretty much any scale. So in this one, we're going to explore Phrygian and we're going to explore Locrian. And over the next few lessons, we'll look at some sweep picking patterns that we can use with the Locrian mode. We'll look at the Locrian pentatonic, which looks pretty cool. And we'll also talk about some other ideas as well. If you haven't checked out my song Arrhythmia, I'm going to play a snippet of it for you, and then we're going to go ahead and get into the lesson. So here we go. Okay, so just to give you an idea of what's going on in the actual song, I picked some pretty easy shapes. I didn't flesh out like full chords, like 6-string chords or anything. I picked some relatively easy shapes that I could use the Phrygian mode over and the Locrian mode over. It starts off with the E Phrygian, and what I play here is I play this. Really simple droning sound, right? Where I'm basically hovering along the E, and then I go ahead and move into a dyad here where I'm playing with my index finger on the 8th fret of the 5th string and my ring finger on the 9th fret of the 4th string. And then I hover back to that E on both of those. And it just goes back and forth. By doing that though, I'm basically in the E Phrygian box, which sounds like this. And you can see that it uses the E note, so I can drone over that with the open E. And it also uses that dissonant note, right, when I play that dyad where I'm playing the 8th fret on the 5th string. Because on the 5th string we're playing 7, 8, and then 10. And then on the 4th string we're playing 7, 9, 10. And then when I get to the 3rd string I'm going to play 7, 9, 10. On the 2nd string, 8, 10. And on the 1st string, 7, 8, 10. So those notes in that rhythm section right there, they fit fine. And it helps us hover back to that sound that I want, which sounds a little bit more diminished or dissonant than your typical Aeolian, which would sound like this. So listen to the difference. Aeolian and then Phrygian. They're only one note different. They're very, very similar, but they have a different sound. That's the really cool thing about the modes. It's just moving 1 or 2 notes around gives you a completely different sound. So let's go ahead and listen to the backing track and take that Phrygian scale and just go back and forth with it and hear how it actually sounds. So that's the Phrygian. If you've watched any of my other lessons, then you probably know about the anchor shapes. If you don't, the anchor shapes allow you to gravitate back towards scales on the fretboard. Usually it's a set of 3 notes or 6 notes across 2 strings, so 3 notes per string. The anchor shapes in your Phrygian mode are going to be found on the 4th and the 3rd strings at the 7, 9, 10. So 7, 9, 10, 7, 9, 10. Those anchor shapes right there will allow me to move into shapes above this and shapes below this. So I can go ahead and move like this. So moving into 9, 10, 12, 9, 10, 12 on the 4th and the 3rd strings. And then the octave of the anchor shape that I played before is going to be on the 2nd and the 1st strings at 10, 12, 13, 10, 12, 13. And then that same shape connects to the shape above it, which is going to be at 12, 13, 15, 12, 13, 15. And that would take us into our next 2 patterns. So it would give us something like this, playing the original Phrygian shape here, moving up, then going to the 2nd and the 1st strings, and then moving up again. Now I'm not going to map out the entire Phrygian shape with you in each of these boxes right now. We might do that in future lessons. I just want to go ahead and show you how we can go ahead and move that around. Now the next part of the song actually moves into Locrian. And what I did, and I did this intentionally, was I used the same scale pattern. I just added some notes and I changed the key of the song so that the scale pattern would go from Phrygian to Locrian. So here's your Phrygian shape. Again, 5th string at 7, 8, 10, 4th string 7, 9, 10, 3rd string 7, 9, 10, 2nd string 8, 10, and then 1st string 7, 8, 10. Now, I could play the same thing on the 6th string that I played on the 1st string, which would be 7, 8, 10. If I change my key to that note right there, which is a B minor, or in this case, a B Locrian, it changes the whole thing to B Locrian. Before I go over exactly how we're doing that, I want you to listen to the song where it changes to Locrian, and you'll hear that it's no longer Phrygian, even though I'm playing almost exactly the same notes. Here comes the change. That's Locrian now. Hear it? So what changed with the chords? We were playing this. And then we're changing to Locrian. So how does it change? This is what it does. Not a whole lot going on there, right? It's not some high octane, fast paced, Megadeth or Metallica song. Just really simple, but I wanted to do that intentionally so that you can hear that change. So what we're doing here is I'm playing a standard bar chord on the 5th and the 4th strings at the 8th fret on the 5th string and the 10th fret on the 4th string, and I'm using my middle finger and my pinky. And then with my index finger, I'm going to go ahead and play the 7th fret of the 6th string, and I'm going to go ahead and bounce back and forth between those two. And then to resolve it, I'm playing an E bar chord, which brings this back to your E Phrygian basically when I play over this part. So now we're basically in Locrian, especially when we're playing these parts. Because you're hovering back to this, and we're going to play these notes. But Locrian doesn't use that note that's on the 5th string to make it a traditional bar chord or a traditional power chord. It doesn't use the 9th fret of the 5th string. It actually uses the 8th fret of the 5th string, which gives you that dissonant sound. So it's going to be played on the 6th string as 7, 8, 10, and the 5th string as 7, 8, 10. And then on the 4th and the 3rd string, just like Phrygian, we're going to play 7, 9, 10, 7, 9, 10. And then when we get to the 2nd string, we're going to play 8, 10. And then when we get to the 1st string, same thing we played on the 6th string, 7, 8, 10. So now you have the same box, we're just adding the 6th string notes, and we're resolving back to that 7th fret on the 6th string, or really the 7th fret on the 6th string and the 8th fret on the 5th string, which creates that dissonance. And then you have Locrian. Now, purists and theorists would say that we need to flesh out an entire chord, and you can explore that. I just want you to have an idea of what it sounds like. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm no purist, I'm no theorist. What basically I'm going to be attracted to is going to be, does it sound good? And to me, this sounds really cool. It sounds really neat. The song Arrhythmia, I think, came out pretty good. I'd like to go back and reflesh it out, make it a little bit better. I improvised a lot of it, and that's something that we could talk about in another lesson too, like actually improvising versus planning everything out. like which one's better. But either way, it creates an interesting dynamic, and you can see how Phrygian and Locrian are basically sister shapes, and they're right next to each other. And we can go ahead and play these as relative shapes, and they work in this song. And the cool thing is when you play the notes on the 6th string that are the 7th, 8th, and 10th frets, when you're playing over this part, you're basically playing Phrygian, but when you're playing this part, you're basically playing Locrian. So let me go back to that part, play that part with the backing track, and just show you how we can go back and forth with that, which is the same basic practice as Phrygian, that we're only adding the Locrian notes on the 6th string, which are going to be the 7th, 8th, and 10th frets. Here we go. So oftentimes there are two schools of thought when it comes to playing solos. One school of thought would say pick the key of the song and play the solo. In this case we could use the E Phrygian or we can use the B Locrian. Either one of these would work, and I could fly all up and down the fretboard using either one of those scales because basically they're the same scale. There's not a whole lot different in them. They're just going to sound different depending on what key we're playing over and what we're resolving back to. Another school of thought would say change the key up every time you play a different chord. So when I'm playing E, I'm going to play that E Phrygian, and when I'm playing B, I'm going to play that B Locrian. You could also argue that we could play a B Phrygian when we're playing over B, and we could play an E Locrian when we're playing over E. We could flip it, right? Or we could just play Locrian the entire time. Like we could play an E Locrian and a B Locrian, or we can play an E Phrygian or an E Locrian, right? We can do it that way, or an E Phrygian and a B Phrygian, right? So in other words, I can move the shape back. So here's what I mean by that. I'll just show you one example. We'll play that to the backing track, and then we'll flesh it out more in future lessons, and you can think about it on your own. Like here is the E Phrygian shape, right? What if I moved all those notes back to the 6th string? Just took the whole shape and adjusted it one string back. So now I'm playing this. Instead of being B Locrian, that's now B Phrygian. So I'm playing on the 6th string, I'm going to play 7, 8, 10. But when I get to the 5th string and the 4th string, I'm going to play 7, 9, 10, 7, 9, 10. And then when I get to the 3rd string, I'm going to play 7, 9. And the 2nd and the 1st strings, 7, 8, 10, 7, 8, 10. So when you get to that part where it's playing the Locrian, rather than playing Locrian, we switch to B Phrygian. Let's just see how that sounds. So here's your E Phrygian part. Now it's switched. So instead of playing Locrian here, I'm going to go ahead and switch to that B Phrygian shape. Now another thing you can think about is when it goes back to the E, like it is right there, I can go ahead and switch back to Phrygian. So here we would play B Locrian. Now E Phrygian. So to my ear, when I was playing B Phrygian, that note right there, which is the 9th fret of the 5th string, didn't fit. It would make more sense to me to keep it E Phrygian, where on the 5th string, I'm playing the 8th fret of the 5th string. And then I go ahead and back it up to the 6th string, and I play the 7, 8, and 10. And keep it like that, which means that your relative Locrian to your relative Phrygian would just kind of stay constant, and we wouldn't have to change the shape around at all. So again, 2 theories on when you play solos. Do you play along to the chord that you're playing, or do you just pick the key and play along to the key? It depends on the song itself. It depends on how you're writing the song. In this case, I intentionally wrote it so that I could play Locrian over certain parts, Phrygian over certain parts, and it was the Phrygian inside the Locrian, so it was the relative Phrygian to the relative Locrian, which made it easy to solo, to go back and forth and find all these different scale shapes. So ultimately, what I did was I basically mapped out a song that I could go ahead and play a shape that, again, it's an oddball shape. It's Locrian and Phrygian. I don't use those very often, but it allowed me to explore those shapes. While exploring those shapes, I found an interesting variation to a pentatonic, and I also found an interesting sweep variation that I want to explore in some future lessons. So I really hope you enjoyed this lesson. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Phrygian and the Locrian shapes. If you've never used those in your playing, then of course this backing track is available on my Patreon. But don't go over there until you get my free course, because in my free course I really break down a lot of this stuff for you. I mainly focus on major and minor shapes, but if you learn the patterns of the major and minor shapes, you can look at those anchor shapes and you can start seeing where the modes fit in as well, because modes are just your do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Your do is going to be your major mode, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Your ti is going to be your minor mode. No, I take that back. Your la is going to be your minor mode. Your ti is going to be your Locrian. And then your Phrygian fits in there, your Ionian, your Mixolydian, your Aeolian, it's all in there. So when you think about do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, for instance, this is the major scale in the key of A. You got do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. All of that right there is going to be your major scale. It's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or what they call solfege. And each one of those is going to start a different mode if you start on that note, which means the shape itself doesn't change. And if you learn the anchor shapes don't change. You can move these scale shapes all over the place, play in any key you want to, play in any mode you want to. You know, it takes a little practice, but you get to the point where you play in any mode that you want to because you understand where they start. And I teach the majority of that in a foundational course that I have that is absolutely free. It's a 7-day or a 7-chunk free course for you. It's at tinyurl.com/DanH411. So when you head on over there, a lot of the core concepts that I teach in that course are foundational to the things that I do on my YouTube channel. So I teach about the circular nature of the fretboard, the circular nature of the shapes themselves, how to find the anchor shapes, how to understand this without thinking about every single note on the fretboard or even knowing the numbers of the frets, just being able to put your fingers on the fretboard and gravitate back to where you want to play, because it helps you unlock the fretboard code and it becomes part of your muscle memory. It becomes tacit. It becomes more natural to who you are as a player rather than being something you have to think about all the time. So if you want to get a few shortcuts and understand this a little bit better than maybe you do right now, then that free course will really help you out. Again, it's at tinyurl.com/DanH411. And of course, the link will be in the description. So be sure to check that out. Don't forget, I got lessons on here at my DanH411 YouTube channel every single week. Like, subscribe, and share, and come back for more. I'll see you in the next one.